fusion एक और super hit book. Always, I think what happens with an Amish book is that you read it and suddenly you get very desperate. Where is the next one?
Not only is it descriptive, it's imaginative, but it's just sheer brilliance.
I wish that there are many more amongst you that will be inspired by today and this evening, and indeed by Amish Tripathi.
He takes on mythology by the core and really, represents us and presents us in a way that we haven't seen before.
The celebrity author, but one of the most influential voices of our times.
It's that kind of a book that could interest my daughter and me at the same time.
Arguably the best-selling Indian author of all time.
What we are seeing today, a publishing phenomenon, nothing less.
No, Amish is India's first literary pop star.
A writer who has charmed the classes and the masses with his fast-paced storytelling, laced with deep philosophies from ancient Vedic India, who succeeded in attracting the smartphone-wielding young generation to the ancient stories of the Puranas and the Ramayana, and became an overnight phenomenon after self-publishing his first book, The Immortals of Meluha. So it's no wonder that his fan following has reached heights unheard of before for an Indian author. But what Amish is writing is not just individual books. He's in fact creating an entire world, a world that will be built over the next 25 years through a series of interconnected books. Links and clues to this entire world can be found across his books. So immerse yourself in the Vedic world of our ancestors, one book at a time. Brought to you by Amish.
Good evening. My name is Rajaraman. I'm a journalist and I'm based in Delhi. And it is my absolute honor to host Amish Tripathi today. Amish, thank you for making time for Takshila Education Society and for the students of DPS across 4 cities in India and many more who have tuned in on YouTube. Thank you so much, Amish.
Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure being here. Thank you for having me, Raja.
I think it is our pleasure. You're being very modest to begin with. That is your trait. For somebody who has achieved so much, you're modest and your humility touches our hearts immediately, Amish. But let me go back and quickly ask you, tell us a little bit about your childhood, because not much is known about it. We know that you've been a banker, that we know that you've studied in IIM. Not much is known about your childhood. Can you begin telling us a little bit about your childhood and the influences that you had in your childhood?
Yeah, I'm a relatively private person, so I don't. Outside of my book launch periods, I don't really do too many media interviews, and yeah, so that's who I am. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's who I am. Childhood, I was born in Mumbai, and early years were in Odisha and then in Tamil Nadu. And then my high school and college was back in Mumbai. I did my MBA in Calcutta, IIM Calcutta. And my family is originally from Kashi. My father's family is originally from Banaras, Kashi. And my mother's family is from Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh. So kind of been all over. And it's the beauty of the childhood that I lived, that one experienced so many parts of this wonderful land that I truly love deeply. land of India.
A true Indian, aren't you? Traveled from Bombay, born in Bombay, went to Odisha, spent time in Tamil Nadu, studied in Kolkata, and now you're in London.
I'm in London, yeah.
Representing all of us there in the Nehru Center. Let me ask you a question that came up from one of the students of DPS schools. The idea is that they have got a lot of questions to ask, and part of this whole structure is I will use a lot of questions that have come from the students of DPS across the country. And here's the first one that is coming to you from Sumer Pratap Singh, I think. Yes, it is Sumer Pratap Singh.
Okay.
One second, I need to get the slide.
I can read it.
I'm just getting there. He's only 13 years old, and can you imagine he's asked you such a serious question to begin with? That tells you the nature of youngsters who are. And he says, how does it feel now to switch roles and be in a diplomatic position in London?
Sumer, lovely question. First of all, I love the name Sumer, man. It has this grandeur to it. Yeah. So yes, you're right. I'm in London right now. I'm a part of the Indian High Commission here, and I am the director of the Nehru Center, which is in a way the Indian equivalent of what the British Council is in India. And the task of the Nehru Center is to promote Indian culture, and in fact, at a deeper level, to drive the India narrative, the conversation around India in the UK and in the larger West. Three cities are culturally very important for the Anglosphere. London, New York, and LA. They define the cultural memes, the cultural conversations in the Anglosphere, the English-speaking world. And we all know the English-speaking world has an outsized cultural influence on the entire world. So London, New York, LA become critically important from that perspective, from a cultural perspective. So it's an honor to be doing this in London. And in a way, it's a continuation of what I have done till now, because most of my books, have been about Indian culture, our heritage, our traditions, but told in hopefully a modern, cool way. I don't write campus romance novels or things like that. So this then comes into a part of the the conversation. In any case, I was doing cultural conversations through my books. Now I also do it in a diplomatic role, and it's a privilege and an honor, to do something for Mother India. It fills pride in the heart, right? Yeah.
Super. Some of that, Amish, the love for Mother India, the love for mythology, the love for stories that are rooted several centuries ago, would have come from your interaction with your grandparents. I read somewhere that your grandfather was a very strong influence. Can you relive some of that beautiful relationship you shared with your grandfather and the influence he's had on you and how you think and who you really are?
Yeah, you're right. My grandfather on my father's side was a Pandit in Kashi and a teacher in BHU. And my grandmother on my mother's side was also a teacher. And both of them extremely religious. So they had a huge influence on their children, my father and my mother, and which obviously had an influence on me. They're both extremely, well-read in our scriptures, in our traditions, which meant that they were automatically very liberal. One of the things Babaji used to say was that the more you read our ancient scriptures, the more liberal you'll automatically become, because our ancient scriptures were deeply liberal, and they weren't the weakling doormat kind of liberalism. It was strong but liberal, right? So there's so much that we can learn from those traditions. And among my treasured childhood memories would be when we were young. I would have been, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 or something. We used to go to Banaras every year, right? For a holiday, he would be there. And I remember there are 4 of us siblings: Dada, Didi, Ashish, my twin brother, and me. And we would go with Babaji, to one of the ghats, often the Tulsi Ghat in Kashi. We're a Shaivite family, but Babaji was very devoted to Lord Ram as well. So he used to take the Ramcharitmanas, with him, and he would go to the Tulsi Ghat and he would sit on the ghat, and he would every Sunday he used to do this. He would just go open it and read a few pages and just do an ucharan, just explain it. And often a crowd would gather just to listen to him. And he used to just do it just free of cost, just for the love of our knowledge. And then I remember that, then he would pick it up, we'd go back holding hands, and he would buy some milk or something on the way, and we'd go back home. And he used to do this, it was one of his things in life. He said that if we are lucky to have been blessed with the wonderful knowledge of our ancestors, it's our duty to spread it. And he was actually a living embodiment of what he believed in. He was a wonderful man, Pandit Babulal Tripathi.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for introducing him to us, for sharing some of that childhood with all of us here. See, we all grow up, and who are we? We are a bundle of experience. At the end of the day, each one of us is a bundle of experience. And there would have been strong influences. There is a question that I have to share that's come from the school. Here it goes. The second question of the day is from Nirnimesh Singh, who's an alumnus from DPS Patna. He wants to know who your favorite authors were when you were in school, and if their writings have inspired you or shaped you personally.
Nirnimesh, very good question. And my honest view on this is, if you have been, if only one author has influenced you, then you've not read enough. It should be an entire galaxy of authors influencing you. And there are so many that one can't even list in the time of this interview. Normally, how I answer this question is, of the books I've read in the recent past, which ones have I liked? Because I read at least 5 to 6 books a month. I've been reading at that pace for decades. I started reading when I was 5 or 6. In our family, everyone reads a lot. And one of the things I always, there are many parents tell them that, look, children will not do what you tell them to do. Children will do what they see you doing. So if you as a parent, if you read, your children will also read. Like my son, he's 11 years old. He reads a lot. He reads more than I do, right? So I used to read a lot. And one of the books that I have liked from the recent set of books I've read is this book by Pawan Verma. He's a brilliant diplomat and author. And he's written this book, a commentary on the Ramcharitmanas, the greatest ode to Lord Ram. It's a little heavy, I admit, for school reading, but it might be worth checking out. I love the book.
Right. There's just another question while we stick on to the same subject. Here's the next question, which has come to you from DPS Patna. Ishit Vyas. The question is pretty direct. He says, have you been influenced by Aldous Huxley ever? Because he sees a lot of similarities in how you have structured your book, and on the Somras, for example, or the socio-political structure. So he sees a lot of similarities and asked this question. Have you been influenced? Is it just a coincidence, or did you draw an inspiration as well?
What is the name again? Ishitva.
Ishitva, that is right.
Okay. If I can just request everyone, please, a loud round of applause for Ishitva. I am so impressed that a kid in school has heard of and read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I've read that book, and of course I like it. The mica system and things in Meluha weren't really inspired from Aldous Huxley, but I will speak of Aldous Huxley in a bit. The mica system was inspired. There is no record of such a system anywhere in the world, at least none that I have come across. But it was inspired a bit from Plato's Republic, and from what I think, that what an ideal truly meritocratic system would be. And this was one of the things that is debated often in our Upanishads as well, where rishis and rishikas, we had male sages and female sages in ancient India, where they debate that what is the best way that a society should be run. The idea had come from there. Part of the Somras actually, it comes from scientific. Among my, the stuff that I read is also pure scientific journals. So journals like American Journal of Human Genetics, Nature, Lancet. I know there are many people raising questions on Lancet at this point of time and their ethics, but it was a very great journal once upon a time. So I gather a lot of scientific knowledge from there. My father himself is a scientist, so then those thoughts kind of then go into my book. So Somras was actually inspired by an article I'd read in Nature. No, sorry, in Scientific American. Now coming to Aldous Huxley, very, very deep question, Ishitwa. When we speak of authoritarianism, often the example that is quoted is 1984, right? George Orwell. It is believed that authoritarianism will come through force, through violence, the way many of the communist countries have been. Most communist countries have been authoritarian. Millions have been killed in the name of communism. And that was one form of authoritarianism, which is very violent, very driven by force. And perhaps since the most, among the most powerful and certainly the most murderous ideology of the 20th century was communism, so then people spoke a lot more of 1984 and George Orwell. But I think the way the world is moving right now, if authoritarianism does become strong and survive, it will probably not be the 1984 model. It will probably be the Brave New World Aldous Huxley model, where authoritarianism is not built on force and violence. Authoritarianism is built on attraction and debauchery, right? Where an authoritarian government doesn't force you to comply, it actually attracts you to comply. And if you think about it that way, then you think about our mobile phones. What are these? These are actually tools to just get us addicted, right? And then our minds can be controlled. What do authoritarian governments want? They want our minds to be controlled, right? And Brave New World is a different model of authoritarianism, where they don't force their way through, they attract their way through. They get you into addictions, into distractions. And I think that's a model we should worry about at this point of time. So I'm extremely impressed, Ishitwa, that you've read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I would encourage all of you to check it out. And if there are kids out here below the 8th or 9th standard, they shouldn't be reading it. They shouldn't be reading that book. But if you're 10th standard and above, I think you can read.
Beautiful. That is a very honest and well-structured response to a deep question, as you put it, Amish. No question about that. But let me move on now. You chose mythology as the genre that you will own. How did this come about? You could have, like you said, written college romance. You could have chosen Alistair MacLean. No, not Alistair MacLean. Like there are so many authors. Arthur Haley, for example, who has the power of description like you have got. Very similar, very strong descriptive skill. You could have chosen to write books like he did. Why did you choose mythology to make your own genre and own it completely?
I guess story ideas tend to come where you have knowledge, and because of my background, I had knowledge of this genre, of this area: spirituality, mythology, history, which all comes into the bucket of itihasa in the Sanskrit word itihasa. So maybe that's why the story ideas came in this area. I don't know if I'll stay in this genre all my life. I mean, there is an idea that has just struck me, and it's growing in my mind in London, something which is based on, in the modern day, and based on time travel and gaming. And I might take that up also sometime. I'm getting inspired by it. But right now I need to write 2 more books of the Ramchandra series. So my focus is primarily out there. But yeah, I think, it's natural for an author to write in an area where he has knowledge, where he has interest. Maybe that's why. So I don't know if I made the choice or the choice was made for me.
Right. Couple of questions from the students while we are at that. There are questions on why you chose, where you got this. Here it is from Akshat Barya from DPS Patna. They want to know how you developed this passion for mythology. Obviously, it is very deep. Obviously, like you said, it stems from the knowledge you've picked up. But this kind of passion seems very rare, and most of us hesitate in sharing that kind of passion these days for fear of being branded. Can you just explain where this passion for mythology came from? Akshat Barya's question.
Hi, Akshat. Thank you. Good question. I think it's just good fortune of birth. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I'm not just saying that because I'm an Indian. I think the challenges that the world is facing today, there are some very good answers to that can be provided by our very own ancient Indian culture. And I'm not saying that just because I'm an Indian. I've read, studied a lot of it. I'm not saying I'm a pandit in it. There are so many who know far more than I do. But it is, the stuff that I have learned makes me think that we can actually contribute a lot to the world. And let me just give one example. One of the dichotomies that's presented to us in the modern world is that you can either be liberal or you can be traditional, that you can't be both, right? And while this may be true in many other countries in the world, I don't want to get into that. But if you have to make a choice between these two, being liberal or being traditional, then in some form or the other, your life gets compromised. You see in the West, I'm living in the UK right now, they actually had a minister for loneliness out here, right? Because in the West, they have taken this to the extreme of liberalism, where they've destroyed all traditions. If you destroy all traditions, all sense of community, I'm simplifying the answer a bit. Of course, some traditions exist, but they have reduced the impact of many traditions. What that has done is led to an epidemic of loneliness. If there's no sense of tradition, no sense of community, people are unmoored, people are lonely. So you'll find that, yes, it's liberal, no doubt, which is very good. LGBT rights, women's rights, which is very good. But they're also very lonely and extremely unhappy, right? So that's not ideal. And then you find some other countries where they can be very traditional, right? Which is good. Sense of community. At a time of crisis like this, there are people who are there to support you. But we all know these countries, there are no women's rights. We all know how women are treated in many of these countries. LGBTs don't even have the right to live in many of these countries, right? Often the punishment is death penalty, which is wrong. So they have traditions, but they don't have liberalism. India is where we can provide the rare culture where we can provide the ideal balance, because our traditions are themselves deeply liberal. So you can be both traditional and liberal at the same time. You can have a sense of community, a sense of strength, and that comes with traditions, that especially in a crisis time like this. But you can be liberal as well. We can fight for women's rights by quoting our own ancient scriptures. We don't have to deny our traditions. We can fight for LGBT rights by quoting our own ancient scriptures. So India is that ideal culture which can provide both traditions and liberalism. This is just one example, and which is where the pride comes from, because there is so much that India can share with the world for the good of the world. So we should learn and we should share. But first, we should practice ourselves.
Right. Much as I would want to ask questions on my own, I think it's only fair that I continue to ask you questions from the student. Here's Pranav Paladugu from DPS Coimbatore. He says, how did the idea of digging into the staple of Indian epics and churning out mythological fiction series occur to you? How did this idea come about? The Immortals, for example, when you started writing Immortals, how did you get it in the first place?
Pranav, I should say though that I used to come to Coimbatore in the 1980s, by the way. Where I studied in Tamil Nadu was Lawrence School in Uti, close to Udakamandalam, Lovedale. So obviously I used to pass through Coimbatore because the train used to come to Coimbatore. So wonderful city, and of course the Nilgiris are stunning beyond measure. I don't think, that I came up with the idea, but I can't even explain how it came to me, because I didn't know fiction before Immortals or Mellow, absolutely nothing. So I know it sounds strange, but I genuinely believe it's the blessings of Lord Shiva. How it comes to me, I don't know. And I just write the way it comes to me. So, I mean, in some ways, this can either, trying to write on a subject like this and, an idea like this can be the most difficult thing in the world. Or in some ways, it can be the easiest thing in the world. Because I don't have to do anything. Lord Shiva sends it. My job is to just write. So I still can't explain how the ideas come to me. It just comes. I open the laptop and I can actually see, that universe, the characters. I can hear their emotions, I can hear their thoughts, feel their emotions, and I just describe what I see. That's how it comes to me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Amish, when people research on the net, and there are a couple of students who asked a very interesting question, they have chanced upon the fact that you turned an atheist at one point of time, and then they want to know how you chose mythology. I will play both those questions just now, and then perhaps you can take up answering that question. Interesting because they have done a little bit of research. This is Ashu from DPS Ludhiana. Want to know what made you begin your career in something career as a writer, in something that you did not have faith in. And then Dishita Priya from DPS Patna. Similar question, who wants to know how did this happen that your own atheism contrasted with what you shared in the book.
So Dishita, and who was the previous one? Ashi.
Ashi is the first girl, and Dishita is the second.
Ashi and Dishita, your research is absolutely right. Yes, I had turned into an atheist in my early college days. I was an atheist for maybe 10, 12 years, and I slowly came back to faith. So it was a return to faith because I was obviously religious when I was young. And I returned to faith with the process of actually writing the first book, Immortals of Mellow. And I think maybe one of the purposes of that book in my life was to bring me back to faith. But this is not to judge atheism. I do want to clarify that in the traditional ancient Indian way, there's nothing wrong with being an atheist. There is no concept of blasphemy, for example, in the dharmic religions, which is Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, in the ancient way. Right? There's no translation for the English word blasphemy in Vedic Sanskrit because the concept didn't exist, so they didn't have a word for it. There's no concept of false gods, for example. Not there. There was, so the thing that was common, which united the dharmic paths, was not so much faith as a common belief in a few concepts. The concept of dharma karma, and dharma karma is essentially what? That you are responsible for what happens to you, right? Your karma will come back to you. Your karma from a previous life or this life will come back to you. So do good karma. No one judges anyone. God doesn't judge you. You don't judge God. We all are, including gods and goddesses, are subject to the laws of karma. Of our ancient schools of philosophy, there were many that were atheist schools. So Sankhyas, Mimamsas, Charvaks, Bodha, Jaina, these are atheist schools from the modern perspective, because they believed in the concept of karma, dharma, Atman, Brahman, which obviously makes them a dharmic religion, but they didn't believe in the concept of a creator God, right? So which means from the modern perspective, they were atheists, but no one in ancient India had any problem with it, because what was important was not whether you're a believer or an atheist. What was important is, are you doing good karma? That was more important, right? And that we should understand of the ancient Indian way. It's more important that you do good karma.
Thank you so much, Amish. I must say that not everybody has the courage to go back in the past, which seems dark slightly to people when they speak about atheism. But you kind of cleared it very nicely that atheism is not bad.
Not in the Indian way. Not in the Indian way.
Not in the Indian way.
In the Indian way, it was always believed that your karma is far more important and how that balances to dharma.
Right. And let me stick to your books now. There's some questions that have come out of your books, and I will stick to the questions that have come from students, because if I ask my questions, we will need a couple of hours. I'm going to run through the questions that have come from the students. The first one is about what inspired you to choose the foundation. The basis is Indian culture and religion. What made you present it in such a bold fashion? You have interpreted it in a modern manner. You've kind of included a lot of current events in this. What inspired you to choose culture and religion as this comes from Riti Chatterjee in DPS Pune.
Good question, Riti. I think partially I answered this earlier, that much of what drives me is my immense pride in India and Indian culture. I genuinely believe, again, I'm not just saying that because I'm an Indian. I genuinely believe that it will be good for modern Indians. It will be good for the world at large to learn from ancient Indian culture, because there are some really wonderful things that our ancestors can teach us. That's what drives me. In terms of having a different interpretation of the stories, I'd love to say that I've done something, path breaking. Who doesn't like to be known as a path breaker? But the reality is I'm not. This tradition of looking at our ancient stories, and interpreting them again for a new age is a very rich tradition in ancient India. The version of the Ramayana that most modern Indians are aware of is the Ramcharitmanas, which was written by Tulsidas ji in the 16th century. And he made many changes from the original Valmiki Ramayana. Most modern Indians have heard of the original Valmiki Ramayana, but most modern Indians have actually not read the original Valmiki Ramayana. The story is actually quite different, and there are many differences in there. There's a version of the Ramayana called the Adbhut Ramayana, in which Sita Ma kills the elder Ravan, the main Ravan, not Lord Ram. Sita Ma kills. There's just one example. If you see the tradition, unfortunately in our schools, we don't teach enough of our ancient Sanskrit poetry. Our schools are still so, colonial. We're still so British Raj driven. 70 saal ho gaye, abhi tak humne, we haven't made our Indian education system truly Indian. We still teach Shakespeare. We don't teach Bhasa or Kalidasa or Thiruvalluvar. We don't teach our own, Mirza Ghalib. We don't teach anything of our own. We are so obsessed with Europe. And since we're not aware of many of the stories that were written. So, for example, Kalidasa is called among the greatest Sanskrit playwright of all times by modern Indians. But in Kalidasa's own words, the greatest Sanskrit playwright of all time was Bhasa, who was more ancient to Kalidasa. Bhasa had written this wonderful play, completely different take on the Mahabharata, called The Five Knights. And in that, he had written his entire interpretation was how actually through the efforts of Lord Krishna, Drona, etc., peace was done between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. And the war actually didn't happen only, the Mahabharata war. Okay, it's completely different interpretation. And the entire point of the play was some very important philosophical discussions that he did. That's a beautiful play written by the greatest Sanskrit playwright of all times. I don't know, 2,500 years ago, right? So this was a rich tradition. And I think the reason for that, why we keep relooking at the stories of our gods and goddesses again and again. We Indians are so obsessed by our gods and goddesses that we never tire of hearing their stories. We want to hear those stories again and again and again, but we want to hear them in different ways, right? And which is what I think keeps these traditions alive. Maybe that's what I'm trying to carry on in my own small way. So I know it might appear like I'm being bold and doing something un-Indian. In fact, I'm being even more Indian by doing something like this.
Beautiful. There is a question related to that, Amish. When we are reinterpreting or interpreting stories in our own way and presenting it in a modern fashion, some of us run the risk of treading on toes. Right? So this question is not mine. It comes to you from Aishwarya in DPS Coimbatore. She says, in many parts of India, gods and goddesses are so revered. So when you're writing a book and you're reimagining or rewriting the mythological story, how is it that you manage to show respect expected by the people? It is very commonplace that you sometimes are accused of going off the beaten track, of portraying somebody in a different light altogether, one of those characters. How did you manage to retain the respect of the readers, and how did you achieve this? Aishwarya from Coimbatore.
Very good question, Aishwarya. And I the format of this is such that I can't hear her. But I'm sure if I ask her, has she ever heard any controversy associated with my name? I've been writing for 10 years now. I've got 7 books out. Has she ever heard any controversy associated with my name? I'm sure Rajaraman will agree with me. I don't think she would have. I'm sure you haven't heard any, Rajaraman, any controversy associated with me ever. Now,
how is that?
Exactly. So one of the things I genuinely believe, and this, I don't think it is anything special that I'm doing. I think it is something special about the kind of country we are, what India is like. We are at our core a deeply liberal country. And again, by liberal, I don't mean left. This modern left-right things are silly, right? Forget about that. That's more a Western thing. By liberal, I mean the ability to respect a different truth. This comes almost intrinsically to us Indians, because we grow up with this. Like I told you, I had studied in Tamil Nadu. So the first time I would have gone to Tamil Nadu, I would have been, it was 83, so I would have been 9 years old, right? And I told you my family was from the north. So most of the stories of our gods and goddesses, what I learned was the northern traditions, or more specifically the UP Bihar traditions. So for us, for example, Lord Kartik is elder, Lord Ganesh is younger. Rajaraman, and in Tamil Nadu, it's the other way around. Lord Ganesh is elder, Lord Kartik is younger. In the north, we believe that Lord Kartik is a bachelor. That's why one of his names is Kumar, right? He's a bachelor. But in the south, Lord Kartik has 2 wives, Valliji and Senaji. And I discovered this as a 9-year-old when I went out there. And I remember in a boarding school, first time I went back, summer holidays, I asked my mother, hey, what is going on? You told me Lord Kartik is a bachelor, but he has 2 wives. What is going on? And so at a young age, and she explained to me that Indians, we have the liberalism to understand and respect different truths. It comes intrinsically to us. So at a young age, I imbibed that lesson. And if you see, every Indian imbibes this lesson at a very young age. So even my mother is a very religious woman. So in the north, she wouldn't enter a Lord Kartik temple because women aren't supposed to enter because he's a bachelor god. But in the south, women enter. So my mother, very religious woman, when she used to come to South India, Tamil Nadu to drop us, Lord Karthik temple, she would peacefully enter and pray out there. When the north, she won't enter. Now, if you think the innate liberalism that just gets imbibed into you, if you're in India, because you're so comfortable with multiple truths. So this is actually something special about India, not something special about me. The only thing, what Aishwarya said is very right. You should write with respect. And that there is no formula for it. You can read a book and you can just tell what mindset did the author come with. You can just tell when you read the book. There are authors, it is a fact. There are authors, there are filmmakers who write with the objective of creating a controversy. Because actually that is the easiest way to do marketing. All you have to do is create some controversy. Media, you know what our media is like. Media will chase you. You'll get 24/7 coverage for 2 weeks. And then the media will move on to the next controversy. And in those 2 weeks, jitna paisa bana sakte ho, aap movie book se banao. Okay. So people themselves try to create controversy for the sake of publicity. That is sadly what happens in India. But if you yourself don't try to create controversy, controversies don't happen. Secondly, if you write or make a movie with respect in your heart, it shows. It just shows, right? And I think Indians are wise enough to sense that. Like Ramanand Sagarji's Ramayana, the television serial. Would you call it disrespectful, Rajaraman?
No, I think it was a super hit then, and it's a super hit.
And it was, yeah, correct. It was a bigger hit than Game of Thrones in the retelecast just a few months back, right? And it's a very respectful take. But Ramanand Sagarji made many changes in his Ramayana to the original Valmiki Ramayana, even from the Ramcharitmanas. In a way, it was more Ramanand Sagarji's Ramayana. But anyone who sees that series, one thing that's very obvious is that Ramanand Sagarji made it with respect. You can have some questions on the special effects that I agree with. Okay. But one thing that's very obvious, he made it with respect. And he didn't have any formula. It was just there in his heart. So it came out, right? So even when I write, there is no formula. But I genuinely worship the gods I write on. I am genuinely proud of our culture. And perhaps that reflects in my books. So therefore, there's no controversy.
So here is a big salute to your mother, Amish, for being the liberal that she is. But apart from the learning from mothers, and they're the best people in the world, mothers being the best people in the world, apart from that, there's a question on research. Obviously, you would have spent a lot of time researching where our mythology, our scriptures. So there is this question that comes to you from Sarah Khanna in Ludhiana. And she asks that it is not easy to write a mythological centric novel as it requires a lot of research. What is the kind of research that you have done yourself before you start writing a book?
A very good question, Sarah. But before that, Rajaram, I should tell you, there's this lovely line. Is there in the Ramcharitmanas. Janani Jan Bhumishcha Swargadapi Garyasi. That mother and motherland are greater than heaven. Lord Ram said this in the Ramcharitmanas. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's a national motto of Nepal as well. Mother and motherland are greater than heaven. Sarah, on research, good question. I think the best way to answer this is I don't do research for writing a book. I think I'm doing research all the time, right? So it's not that I'm writing a book, so therefore I'll do this research. No. I'm doing research all the time. What will go into my books, I don't know. Okay. So like I said, I read a lot. I read at least 5-6 books a month. I travel a great deal. Traveling is one of the best ways to research and learn. The very word Ramayana means the travels of Ram, the journey of Ram. In ancient times, it was believed that any travel, any journey is in effect an educational experience. And I would suggest all of you guys also, you must travel. Once the COVID crisis is over, you must travel. But when you travel, try to travel as a local. You know? So if you're going to Bali, try and eat local food. Try and learn a bit of the local language. speak to locals. What it does is it kind of just all of this goes back as knowledge, in the back of the mind, and that's how I live. I read a lot. I travel, especially to historical places, and I can never be sure what knowledge will get used where. I just gather knowledge because it's like buying the ingredients for a meal, right? How that will come together into a dish is up to Lord Shiva. That's how I do research.
Right. There are a couple of questions, Amish. I'm going to play both of them one after the other. In fact, there are 3 questions. I'll play 3 of them. I will have the names down for you so we know who's asked which question. But there are 3 very interesting questions that I will play quickly. The first one comes from Rinku Kumari in Coimbatore, whose basic question remains: how do you look at popular mythical stories when the whole thing is about creating larger-than-life heroes? So how do you now relook at these stories? That's Rinku Kumari's question. Medha Paul has a very specific question on vengeance. She says, why should Shiva avenge Sati's death? Maybe he could have forgiven the whole population instead of using the big astra that he had. Why did he not forgive? Why did he have to take vengeance? That's Medha Paul's question. She says that vengeance is a negative emotion, especially in the current context. So she probably has a very valid question there. Then there is Advaita Joshi from DPS Pune, who says, Parvati, there is not much mention in the Oath of Vayuputras, especially after Sati's death in the book. So the 3 questions, in fact, there's a 4th one, which is got to do with Lord Ram being contrarian to the image that we've got of Ram in the mind. Naman Chaturvedi from DPS Pune. What motivates you to bring to the fore such information that is different to what all of us are believing? 4 interesting questions from different people. Naman has got this question on Ram being a contrarian character. Maybe you can answer that first.
All very good questions and very deep questions, and I think the best way to answer this is by taking that first question. That
I'll get back to that.
What is mythology? No, I remember that question. That mythology is essentially stories. Right. In the modern way, mythology's respect has been reduced. Mythology is equated often to the Hindi word mithya, which means untruth, and believe that history is truth and mythology is untruth. Our ancients used to say, which even many modern scientists are accepting as well, that the only subject that can claim to know absolute truth is mathematics. Mathematics is the only subject in 2 is 4. There is no perspective in it. That is the truth. Which is why Galileo had said that maths is the language in which God wrote the universe. In every other subject, including even in theoretical physics, truth is subjective. It is defined by the perspective of the observer. So there is your truth and there's my truth. So mythology in that sense is different from history only in the sense that history is like an immature child jumping up and down saying my truth is the truth. Whereas mythology is like a mature adult. It just says, this is my truth. You find your truth. Now, if you understand it from this perspective, then look at the root of the word mythology as well. It actually comes from a Greek word called mythos. And the true meaning, the root of that Greek word mythos is a story which hides the philosophical truth. So the entire point in a mythological story is not so much the story. It's to understand the philosophy behind the story and then apply that in your own life. You have to see it from that perspective. And then that clarifies how one should see all the other questions that were raised. So one is on Lord Ram, for example. You're right, the popular perception of Lord Ram in today's day is once again defined largely by the television serial, Ramanand Sagarji's television serial. But there are different interpretations of Lord Ram. There's a Jain version of the Ramayana in which Lord Ram is completely non-violent. So he doesn't kill Ravana. It's a Jain version, right? So Lord Ram is completely non-violent, and it's Lord Lakshman who kills Ravan in that version of the Ramayana. In the Valmiki Kand, which many scholars say was perhaps added in later and interpolated in later, not a part of the original text. Lord Ram is not shown as a god. I mean, he is a Vishnu, but he essentially believes he's a human being. Remember, Ravan had asked for a boon from Lord Brahma that he cannot be killed by anyone except a human being. Right? That's a boon that Ravan had asked for, because he assumed that a human being will not be able to kill him. Because I'm talking about the traditional story, not my story. Because Ravan was a Rakshas, so human beings are weak, they'll not be able to kill. That's what Ravan had assumed, and that's why he'd asked for that boon. So even in the Valmiki Ramayana, Lord Ram is actually shown as a human being, because only a human being could kill Ravan. So there are different interpretations. And the question that arises is, where do these different interpretations, why do they come up in different ages? Coming back to that point of mythology, it's because that interpretation serves a philosophical purpose at that point of time in history. I think, one of the reasons this story comes to me this way is I love India. I'm a deeply proud Indian. But a big part of loving something is not just celebrating everything that should be celebrated, which I of course do, but wanting improvements where there should be improvements as well. Like our parents love us, right? And they will praise us when we do some good. When we don't do good, they'll want us to improve, right? There are some things in India that need to be improved. Like, in my mind, one of the things that India can certainly improve is, many of us Indians need to start respecting the law and following rules. We have made a habit out of just breaking rules, even when it doesn't serve a purpose. It's almost like हमें मजा आता है कानून तोड़ने में, कानून की धज्जियां उड़ाने में. What kind of story and what kind of image of Lord Ram will make us think about it? That maybe there's something we can learn. And if all of us start following rules, India will be a better country, right? And maybe that's why Lord Ram came to me this way. That if he's also someone struggling, and he's also someone who shows a better path to his people. Because even his people at his time do not respect the rules. But Lord Ram shows that he himself will be subordinate to the law, to the laws, even if he suffers for it. Think of the role model and the example that sets. That we Indians, that if even Lord Ram can follow the law, then who are we, boss? We should follow the law. Correct? So maybe that's why the story comes to me. The question on the ending of the Shiva trilogy, very good question. Will be a very long answer. I notice we have just 4 minutes left. I think that was from Ipshita or someone. I have given a long answer to this on the philosophical reasons behind that in my book, Immortal India. It is there, because this is a question that has been asked to me. I'm very impressed you asked that question, because many people don't think through the purpose of an ending. Like, just in very brief summary, there's a Western storytelling style, which comes largely from what I know. I don't know the West as much as well, but from what I know, it comes from Aristotle's Poetics, where the entire story is supposed to have a beginning, middle, end, and the end is supposed to be something with a nice conclusion, which, put a bow in it, and, and then you just stop thinking about it because it's a nice sense of conclusion and you move on from the story, you forget the story. Indian storytelling style is completely the opposite. The Indian storytelling style is that at the ending, you should not have a sense of conclusion. In fact, you should be more troubled at the end than you were at the beginning. Why is that? Because the moment you have a sense of conclusion, you are at peace, you stop thinking. Moment you stop thinking, you don't learn any philosophies. But when you are in a position of discomfort, you're forced to think. And when you think, you learn some philosophies, right? If you think about it this way, then the ending of the Ramayana, the traditional Ramayana and Mahabharata, also start making sense to you. The traditional Ramayana and Mahabharata leave you unhappy, right, at the end. And it is there for a purpose, because our ancestors used to believe you should not be comfortable. You should not have a sense of conclusion. You should be forced to keep on thinking, ye kyun hua? And what can I learn from it? And I give some thoughts on what we can learn from that ending. It's there in my book, Immortal India. Do check it out. But very, very, I am so happy that you asked this question, because that is the purpose of that ending. To make you think and learn some philosophies.
That came from Mehta. Amish, I'm going to do a typical...
Can I just say, very smart kids, man. Very, very intelligent questions, yeah?
I'm going to do a very Indian thing now. I'm going to give you 5 minutes extra of your time. I know we said... I'm going to... because there are some interesting questions. Like I said, I'm holding my questions back, and I'm only posting questions that come from...
But very, very intelligent questions, man. I'm very impressed.
See, there is one from... one second, where are we? One of it is, how would you like society to change, influenced by your writing? What are your expectations of your own writing? How do you think society should adapt from what you have taught society? One. Secondly, do you feel any pressure, because you have done some wonderful books, they have sold millions of copies? Do you feel any pressure when you sit down to write now? Which I think Bihan's question is interesting too. And then finally, there is this question about what are your little tips for budding writers? Should they focus on writing, or should they have a backup plan?
Good questions all. The Harpreet was what society? Harpreet, all my books always have a core philosophy, like around which the story is built. The core philosophy at the heart of the Shiva Triology is an answer to this question: what is evil? And the answers aren't simple, obviously. That's what I try and explore through that series. The core philosophy at the heart of the Ramchandra series is what is an ideal society? What are the choices you have to make? Because perfection is most of the time a journey rather than a destination, and you have to make choices. Like there are sometimes a choice between laws and justice, right? And I explored that subject. That then what should you do? There's sometimes a choice between compliance to laws and freedom. At that time, what should you do? And the answers aren't simple. So I explore many of these thoughts through the Ramchandra series. And but if I have to summarize the way I look at life, is I think divinity is in balance. Any form of extremism is not good, and which is certainly not the Indian way. Ati sarvatra varjayit. Excess of anything is not good. Extremism of any kind is not good. That comes down to us from our ancestors. So extremism of any kind, where non-violence is of course good. But if you become so non-violent that you can't defend yourself, say from Pakistani invaders, that's not good, right? But you shouldn't go on the other extreme and create such a violent society that there's chaos everywhere. So again, balance. Earning money. We have, as a society, we have imbibed many socialist attitudes, and we just assume that every businessman is a chore, which is silly, boss. I mean, if there aren't enough businessmen, who's going to generate the wealth that our country needs to take care of the poor? So, of course, we should respect wealth creation and wealth generation. But if we become so obsessed by it that we don't take care of our poor, that is also not good. So, any form of extremism is not good. Balance is the ideal place to be in. and which is normally the Indian way. The Indian way was always about trying to find the ideal balance. Extremism of any kind is not good. Maybe that's what I'd like to see in individuals and in society. Then the next question was,
there was a question on tips for writers. I would also include a little bit of marketing, given that you did something innovative for your first book.
Sure. Tips on writers. My suggestion, I resigned only after my second book. I come from a humble family. I've never hidden that. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm very proud of it. So I resigned only after my second book, when my royalty check became more than my salary. It was a very practical, pragmatic decision. One of the things I always advise students, that you should have a balance between your heart and your mind. Let your heart decide the destination, okay, but let your mind plot the journey. Okay, if you go too much of the extreme of your heart, where you jump without thinking, you'll often meet failure and you'll be unhappy with life. But if you don't listen to your heart at all and only follow your mind, by the time you're 50 or 60, you'll be very unhappy with life, because you have no passion. You're just compromising with life. That's also not good. So find a balance between the two. Let your heart decide the destination. Let your mind plot the journey. So therefore, see, the thing with writing is that it is a high risk, high return game, right? 99% of writers don't even make enough money to pay the bills at the end of the month. But 1% or maybe 0.5% of the writers make more money than they ever thought possible. Okay, it is that way. Unlike, say, a career of a banker or a IT professional, or various other, the more traditional sectors. So what I would suggest, there's no dishonor in having a job which pays the bills and write on the weekends. That's what I did for 5-6 years. I wrote my first 2 books along with my job. So have a balance. And of course, what Rajaraman said is very right. A book doesn't sell itself. Once you publish the book, you have to market it as well. So be mindful of that as well. Be pragmatic. But when you're writing the book itself, be completely pure. When you're writing the book, and that segues into the last question, I guess, that was asked, that do the expectations of the readers have an impact on me? Not at all. I start thinking about readers only once the book is complete, only when I'm in the marketing phase. When I'm writing, I don't care 2 hoots about anyone. Honestly, not the readers, but not the editors, publishers, anyone. I only write what feels right to me. I start thinking about what others will think of the book only during the marketing phase. So in my mind, a good creative person should almost be like a schizophrenic. Okay, a bit like how Amir Khan is. I'm not saying he's schizophrenic, but how Amir Khan works. I don't know him personally, but from what I know, Amir Khan, when he makes his movies, he doesn't care at all whether it will be successful or not. He doesn't do any market research. What market research would have told him that a movie on a dyslexic child will be a hit? But he still made it, right? Tare Zameen Par. And he starts thinking of marketing only once the movie is complete. So the movie itself will be completely pure, made with a heart, and then starts thinking practical, pragmatic thing in the marketing phase. That's how I write my books as well. When I'm writing, I don't care at all about anyone. And I'm very clear, if my books start flopping, I'll go back to a banking job. I'm in a diplomatic job. Maybe I could take this up as well. But I will write the way I want to write. That I'm very, very clear on. My books are the voice of my soul. They have to be pure. I start thinking practical, pragmatic stuff ki bhai marketing kaise karna hai only once the book is complete. So no, I feel no pressure at all of the readers when I'm writing. I may feel the pressure when I'm marketing. Yes, there is.
We started on a very high note. There was a very deep question to begin with. I will be very unfair if I don't share 2 questions with you, which are on feminism. Both stem from your book. Please answer in short, and then we can wrap this up. There is Sridatri Saha, who wants to know. Where is the question?
I can read it. I can read it.
This is about this is about presenting ideas to the world. Continues with marketing without diluting it, and then finding that positive commercial outcome. Here is a question that I reserved for the very end. Mohammad Faraz from DPS Patna. He's a young lad of 13. He's got 3 elder sisters, and he believes that they are discriminated against. But he says that everyone is partial to him, and then he brings in Sita, and says, do you think women enjoyed the same exalted status as Sita in the past? And if so, how did the equality of genders change in history? I know it is a deep question.
Very deep question. Okay.
I had to share it with you.
Okay. I think the earlier question I kind of answered in any case, that you can have, and it's true. There are many. It's an assumption that to sell commercially to the masses, you have to dumb it down. That is not true, boss. Look at Chris Nolan's movies, yeah. Inception, and they're not really dumb movies, but they're hugely commercially successful. You can make it deep and intelligent and market it well and make it commercially successful. That balance is possible. Okay. You just have to give up that silly notion that if you want to make it mass, you have to dumb it down. Not true at all. Okay. Mohammed, I love your question, and I love the fact that you're thinking of your sisters this way. Be the change you want to see. And as far as ancient India is concerned, dude, we had the equivalent of women prophets in ancient India. Rig Veda, most ancient scriptures. We had rishis whose hymns are written in there. We had rishikas as well, women rishis. Maharishika Gargi, Maharishika Maitreyi. And the status of rishis and rishikas was even higher than kings and queens. We had women rulers like Prabhavati Gupta, for example. So in India, there's a rich tradition of seeing men and women as equals. And there are wonderful examples from all traditions. Muhammad, I'm sure you'd know this if you don't check with your parents. Prophet Muhammad's wife, Khadija al-Kubra, was a businesswoman. She used to run a business, and the Prophet was her employee. I'm surprised. I meet so many Muslims who themselves also don't know this. Okay, now isn't that a wonderful role model, right? It is up to us what role models we want to speak of, right? We can look into our past and find stories which can justify the oppression of women. Equally so, we can look into our past and find stories which preach the equality between men and women. And I love it, Mohammed, that you yourself are thinking about this, and that you must be the change you want to see. You must ensure that your sisters and you are treated as equal. That's what will make your parents proud. That's what will make your life successful. And that is the truly Indian way to be. God bless you, Mohammed. The fact that you even asked this question shows that you have the right attitude. And I'm sure your sisters are very, very, very proud of you. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Amish. Today, I'm blessed. I learned from the youngsters who asked all the questions, and I learned from you. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for your time, Amish. It has really been wonderful. I'm sure.
And may I say, I love the questions. Such deep, insightful, intelligent questions. India has a great future, man. India has a damn good future.
They made my job so easy, Amish. I had nothing to do but just present their questions to you. I wish it was them asking you the question, but I had to play the role today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to DPS and to Takshila for what they have done today. Beyond Mountains is beautiful, but the world is one. The world is one.
Bye, Rajaraman. Bye. Bye, everyone.